The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or another print disability that makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org. Your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service now presents a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for Easter Sunday, April 5th. Your reader for the first hour will be Edwin J. Vieira, and for the second hour, your reader will be Ron Bickelman. First, a look at the week's weather. Considerable cloudiness today with a brief shower or two, windy and cooler. There can be some wet snowflakes in the mix with a high of 46, and cloudy tonight with a low of 33. A couple of rain or snow showers tomorrow to start off the work week with a high of 40 and a low of 27. Tuesday, we'll see a couple of morning snow showers with a high of 34 and a low of 22. The temperature kicks up on Wednesday, and it'll be mostly sunny with a high of 51 and a low 53. Thursday, it'll be mostly cloudy and breezy with a high 64 and a low 45. The rain returns on Friday. It'll be cooler and a high of 54 and a low 42. Partly sunny on Saturday with a high 62 and low 49. And now here's our first story. Agent barred from carrying gun loses another ruling. Judge says he has easy road to relief but refuses to take it. At first blush, it seemed Edmund J. Sussman Jr. might quickly regain his right to carry a gun after he filed his federal lawsuit in December 2024. After all, the 52-year-old Erie County resident carried a firearm for years as a federal agent on protective details for diplomats and held a top-secret security clearance. Sussman's 4-day psychiatric admission to Erie County Medical Center for suicidal thoughts in 2015 triggered his designation as a person prohibited from possessing firearms. Given Sussman's decades of carrying a gun as part of his job duties, we ought to be able to resolve this relatively quickly, U.S. District Judge Lawrence Villardo said at Sussman's first court appearance. But 15 months later, Sussman's case appears doomed in district court. Villardo on Tuesday dismissed FBI Director Kash Patel and former U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi as defendants in the Second Amendment case. That leaves only state officials as defendants, and Villardo said in a ruling last year that Sussman's plight stems from a federal statute, not from the state reporting his stay at Erie County Medical Center to the federal government. The background check. For years, Sussman did not know his mental health visit had been reported to the FBI's National Instant Criminal Background Check System. He filed his lawsuit after he attempted to buy a gun on November 22, 2024, and was denied after the NICS background check found he was prohibited from doing so based on his 2015 hospitalization. Sussman has argued that his name should not be on the prohibited persons list, describing his hospitalization as voluntary. Sussman in a court filing said he simply sought to speak with someone and that he was discharged after a psychiatrist determined he was not a danger to himself or others. Amy L. Bellantoni, Sussman's Westchester County lawyer, seeing no path to a court victory in Buffalo, asked Villardo on Wednesday for a final ruling so she can take the case to the Second U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in New York. The sooner this court enters a complete final order, the sooner the Second Circuit can consider it, Bellantoni said in a court filing Wednesday. Villardo said his ruling does not suggest, quote, Sussman is unstable or dangerous or mentally ill. Indeed, the record suggests he's not. Villardo said he sorted through a complex web of federal and state laws and regulations governing a background check system that has prevented Sussman from purchasing a firearm. State law directs the State Office of Mental Health to report NICS the mental health information of people who have been involuntarily committed to a hospital, and federal law bars people who've been involuntarily committed to a mental institution from possessing a firearm. Bellantoni and government lawyers have wrangled over whether Sussman's admission to ECMC was voluntary or involuntary. Either way, under the federal firearms law, a psychiatric admission such as Sussman's, no matter how Sussman describes it, disqualifies him from receiving or possessing any firearm or ammunition, Villardo has said. Bellantoni has said it doesn't matter because he was released from the hospital without being diagnosed as dangerous or mentally ill. Villardo indicated early last year he was not going to undermine the federal statute. Declaring the statute unconstitutional is swatting a fly with a sledgehammer, Villardo said during a hearing last year. The statute is not unconstitutional. Sussman's situation pretty clearly cries out for him to get some relief from the situation that he's in, Villardo said at the hearing. On the other hand, there may well be situations where there's an admission And the person who's been admitted shouldn't have a weapon and gets a weapon, goes out and shoots a whole bunch of people. We see that happening all the time today. This is one of those situations where hard cases make bad law, and I'm very concerned about making bad law, Villardo said last year. So what's the administrative remedy? In his ruling Tuesday, the judge acknowledged that the gun prohibition poses a hardship to Sussman, but that hardship is largely self-imposed. Sussman has not pursued the Office of Mental Health's process to remove his name from the prohibited list through applying for a certificate of relief from disability. That administrative process gives people who have been involuntarily committed a chance to regain their right to carry a firearm, but also allows the government to protect the people by ensuring the people who want to carry guns aren't dangerous. Villardo has said it looks likely Sussman would gain the certificate of relief. Sussman served 22 years in the military, and until his recent retirement, he was a special agent with the Bureau of Diplomatic Security under the U.S. Department of State. He served as a liaison agent to FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force in Buffalo and had passed extensive background checks to achieve a top security clearance and retired in September 2025. Villardo credited Sussman for seeking mental health help in 2015. The judge said he has sympathy for the red tape that he faces as a result of his having done the right thing, but red tape is all he faces, at least at this point. Based on the court record, there appear to be good, in fact compelling reasons why Sussman ought to be able to possess and purchase a firearm again, Villardo said. There is an administrative process to restore that right to those in Sussman's position, a process Sussman thus far has refused to pursue. At previous court hearings, Bellantoni, Sussman's lawyer, said gaining a federal court order would be a quicker route to reinstating his gun ownership rights, and timing was important when he filed the lawsuit because he held a job that required him to carry a firearm. Sussman also had no obligation to go through the certificate of relief process because the state should not have reported him as a person disqualified from buying or possessing a gun in the first place, Bellantoni argued. Sussman has what looks like an easy road to relief, and for some reason he's chosen not to take that road, Villardo said in his new ruling. His constitutional claim is therefore not yet fit for judicial decision. Why Sussman refuses to ask the court for relief is a mystery to this court. As best we can tell, it is because Sussman and perhaps his lawyer have a point they want to make, but this court does not have the jurisdiction to help them make said point, and even if it did, the court would not do so. Villardo said in his ruling he intended to refer the case to a magistrate judge to proceed with evidence discovery matters concerning the state officials who remain as defendants, including Division of Criminal Justice Services Commissioner Rossano Rosado and Mental Health Commissioner Anne Marie Sullivan. But Bellantoni said the state defendant's liability turns entirely on the same constitutional question that Villardo resolved for the federal defendants, so there's nothing more to develop factually or legally with respect to the constitutional questions in district court. This case has been litigated for over a year, Bellantoni said in her court filing, requesting an immediate final judgment from Villardo. The court has heard oral arguments 3 times, reviewed voluminous submissions, and produced 2 detailed and thorough opinions. The constitutional question has been briefed fully. There's no need for further briefing, discovery, or proceedings to resolve the court's interpretation of the state defendant's liability on the existing record. Trump confronting war's uncertainties while going it alone. President Donald Trump did not equivocate in his first live address to Americans about the war in Iran. "We've beaten and completely decimated Iran," he said in a primetime speech from the White House on Wednesday. "They're decimated, both militarily and economically and in every other way." He added, quote, "Their radar is 100% annihilated. We are unstoppable as a military force." His certitude is now colliding with the uncertainty of war. The American fighter jet that was shot down in Iran on Friday was a searing reminder of the dangers associated with war, prompting a search operation that resulted in the rescue of 1 crew member. Another U.S. aircraft was hit by Iranian air defenses, Iranian state media reported days after Trump said Iran had, quote, "no anti-aircraft equipment." For the Republican president, who did not appear in public Friday, the developments were the latest example of his triumphal characterization of the war appearing misplaced. He's expressed surprise at Iran's moves to strike its Gulf neighbors. He has struggled to respond to Iran's move, largely shuttering the Strait of Hormuz, disrupting global oil supplies and sending pump prices soaring in the U.S. His overtures to world leaders to help him reopen the vital waterway have been rebuffed, with some allies waiting for the fighting to end before addressing that situation and others openly critical of the war that Trump chose to initiate. Trump has long relied on unyielding self-confidence to propel himself through the worlds of business and politics, boasting during the 2016 campaign that I alone can fix it. That's often translated into a go-it-alone approach, where only Trump has the answers in a chaotic world and dysfunctional Washington. This view of the presidency has justified his executive orders at home and tariffs that affect the global economy. But the war with Iran, which he undertook, alongside Israel and without consulting other allies or Congress, has provided a test like almost nothing before. For Trump, it is no longer America first, but America alone, and he is the principal. You can be the most assertive, aggressive president in the world, but you don't control what happens overseas, said Julian Zelizer, a history professor at Princeton University. And traditional allies are speaking out. As the war enters its sixth week, that reality is becoming more apparent. Trump spent most of the first year of his second term using trade penalties as a weapon that would force other countries to bend to his will. Today, in a time of war, some traditional American allies are becoming more outspoken. French President Emmanuel Macron said this past week the U.S. can hardly complain afterward that they are not being supported in an operation they chose to undertake alone. This is not our operation, he said. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has not budged from his refusal to be drawn into the war, despite fierce criticism from Trump about France and the United Kingdom are leading efforts to reopen the strait once the fighting ends. On Friday, Macron and South Korean President Lee Jae-myung agreed to work together in that effort. We need to clearly define at the international level the conditions for a process to ease the crisis and conflict in the Middle East, Macron said. We need to ensure that the Strait of Hormuz is reopened. Meanwhile, at home, even some of Trump's fellow Republicans are reinforcing the need to maintain strong international relationships. After the president threatened to withdraw from NATO this past week, Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Republican of South Dakota, said there were not enough votes in the Senate to support that. We got an awful lot of people who think that NATO is very critical, incredibly successful in a post-World War II alliance, Thune said of past conversations among Republicans about the move. I think in the world today, you need allies. But Trump made no mention of leaving NATO during his White House address. John Bolton, a first-term Trump national security advisor who has since become an adversary, said the current administration made a, quote, serious mistake by not consulting allies before going to war. If you don't build your coalition before the war, it's pretty tough to do it while you're in it, said Bolton, who pleaded not guilty last fall to federal charges, accusing him of emailing classified information to family members and keeping top-secret documents at his Maryland home. But he also cautioned European leaders against reflexively opposing Trump out of frustration with his lack of consultation. That, Bolton said, would be juvenile and petulant. So it's done on his own terms. Trump's penchant to work on his own terms is not limited to the war. This past week, he said congressional approval of a ballroom he wants to build at the White House isn't necessary, despite a judge's ruling. He signed an executive order to create a nationwide list of eligible voters and to restrict mail-in voting. In a first for a sitting president, he appeared in the courtroom of the Supreme Court as his administration tried to defend an executive order restricting birthright citizenship. But as with the war, Trump's go-it-alone strategy at home is also confronting its limits. The Supreme Court struck down his far-reaching tariff program. Democrats quickly challenged his voting executive order in court, and despite his courtroom presence, the justices seemed skeptical of his bid to dismantle the Constitution's provisions providing birthright citizenship. Then there's the uncertainty about the ballroom. During private comments at an Easter lunch at the White House last week, Trump, ever the builder, seemed to lament the constraints on his job. I'm such a king I can't get a ballroom approved, he said to laughter from an audience that included cabinet leaders and religious leaders. I'm doing a lot, but I could do a lot more if I was a king. You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. The time for our morning listeners is 9:14 a.m. For our afternoon listeners, the time is 4:14 p.m. And now on to a front page feature. Thanks to Detroit's loss, the Sabres have finally made the Stanley Cup playoffs. So what's next? The Buffalo Sabres finally ended the longest postseason drought in NHL history Saturday without even playing a game, as the Detroit Red Wings' 4-1 regulation loss to the New York Rangers in a matinee at Madison Square Garden allowed Buffalo to clinch its first berth in the Stanley Cup playoffs since 2011. With their playoff ticket officially punched, the Sabres' schedule continued Saturday night with a 7 p.m. game against the Washington Capitals in Capital One Arena. Rookie forward Gabe Perreault, who is in no relation to Sabres icon Gilbert Perreault, notched his first career hat trick as the Rangers, who were last in the East, did the Sabres a huge favor while damaging Detroit's playoff hopes. The accomplishment is obviously something worth celebrating for both the Buffalo organization and its long-tortured fan base. But collecting an invitation to the playoff party is just the first step in a long-awaited run that could last as few as 4 games or 2 months for the Sabres. The playoffs now in their immediate future, the Sabres still can't lose sight of the huge stakes to play for over the final 6 games of the regular season. With all that in mind, here's what's ahead for the club over the next couple of weeks. The playoff schedule. The Sabres are expected to open the Eastern Conference quarterfinals on either Saturday, April 18th or Sunday, April 19th. All series are best of 7 with a 2-2-1-1-1 format. If the Sabres finish first or second in the Atlantic Division, the first 2 games of the series will be in KeyBank Center. If they finish third, they'll open on the road. Several teams are still in line to be Buffalo's first-round opponent. The likely foes are one of Montreal, Boston, Columbus, Ottawa, Detroit, Philadelphia, or Washington. A much lesser but not impossible scenario could have the Sabres meeting Tampa Bay in round 1 if Montreal passes both teams to win the Atlantic Division, leaving the Sabres and Lightning in the 2 and 3 spots. The Rangers' win Saturday also provided a clinch for Tampa Bay, which will appear in the playoffs for the 9th straight year. So what are the standings? The Sabres, 46, 22, and 8, enter Saturday tied with Tampa Bay for the Atlantic Division lead at 100 points. The Lightning currently hold the tiebreaker advantage by playing 1 fewer game. Montreal, which has won 7 games in a row, has gotten back into the race for the division title and is at 98 points. Tampa Bay hosts Boston at 5 p.m. Saturday, while Montreal's at New Jersey at 7. The Sabres are also battling Carolina for first place in the Eastern Conference and home ice advantage in a potential conference final series, and currently sit 2 points behind the Hurricanes, who host the New York Islanders at 7 p.m. And if you're thinking about the Sabres and the President's Trophy for finishing first overall, that quest is still alive, but not likely to be reached. The Sabres are 8 points behind Colorado, which is 49, 15, and 10 for 108 points, and the Avalanche have 2 games in hand with 8 to play. So what's left for the remaining games? After the Washington game, the Sabres stage what might rate as the biggest regular season game ever in KeyBank Center on Monday when they host Tampa Bay. It's the 4th and final meeting of the season before the Sabres and Lightning and the rematch of the epic March 8th thriller won by the Sabres 8-7. A regulation win from either side in this game would go a long way toward the teams cementing the division title. The teams combined for 102 penalty minutes and 10 fighting majors in the last meeting, and the Sabres could be looking for a measure of revenge against Tampa Bay forward Brandon Hagel for his ambush of Buffalo captain Rasmus Dahlin in that game. Hagel received a $5,000 fine from the NHL for his actions as the aggressor of an altercation. The Sabres have never won the Atlantic Division, with their last title coming in 2010 when they topped the Northeast Division with 110 points in a season. The Sabres' full remaining schedule looks like this: Saturday at Washington, Monday versus Tampa Bay, Wednesday at New York Rangers, April 9th versus Columbus, April 13th at Chicago, April 15th versus Dallas. Don't discount that April 15th finale from being meaningful either. The Stars have 102 points, just 2 ahead of Buffalo with 6 games left for each team. If the teams want to party like it's 1999 and meet in a Stanley Cup final rematch of the no-goal series, their regular season point totals could determine home ice advantage. Dallas will host Colorado at 3 p.m. Saturday. Tune in on ABC. And now on to world news. Amid search for pilot in Iran, Trump notes deadline is looming. The U.S. military on Saturday searched for a missing pilot shot down over a remote area in Iran, while President Trump remained silent on his incident but reminded Tehran of his Monday deadline to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, 48 hours before all hell will rain down on them. The U.S. warplane identified by Iran as an F-15E Strike Eagle was one of two attacked on Friday, with one service member rescued. Iran has promised a reward for whoever turns in the missing pilot. It's the first time the U.S. has lost aircraft in Iranian territory during the war, now in its sixth week, which could further pressure on Trump to end the fighting. Iran's Joint Military Command on Saturday claimed it also struck two U.S. Black Hawk helicopters the day before, but the Associated Press could not independently verify that. The war began with joint U.S.-Israeli strikes on February 28th and has killed thousands, shaking global markets, cut off key shipping routes, and spiked fuel prices. It shows no signs of slowing as Iran responds with attacks region-wide. Trump earlier in the week said in a national address that the U.S. has, quote, beaten and completely decimated Iran. The U.S. and Israel boasted that Iran's air defenses were obliterated, but on Saturday, an apparent Iranian drone damaged the headquarters of U.S. technology company Oracle in Dubai, the United Arab Emirates. Both sides have threatened and hit civilian targets and infrastructure in the war. But on Saturday, the Atomic Energy Organization of Iran said that an airstrike hit near its Bushehr nuclear facility, killing a security guard and damaging a support building. It's the fourth time the facility was targeted. The head of Russia's state nuclear corporation, Rosatom, said 198 workers were being evacuated. But there's a signal for talks. Pakistan's foreign ministry spokesperson Tahir Andrabi told the AP that his government's efforts to broker a ceasefire are right on track. Last week, Pakistan said that it would soon host talks between the U.S. and Iran. Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, said that they have never refused to go to Islamabad. Mediators from Pakistan, Turkey, and Egypt are working to bring the U.S. and Iran to the negotiating table, according to two regional officials. They said that they were working on bridging the gap between the two sides' demands to stop the war and reopen the crucial Strait of Hormuz. The proposed compromise includes a cessation of hostilities to allow a diplomatic settlement, according to a regional official involved in the efforts, and Gulf diplomat briefed on the matter. They spoke on condition of anonymity to discuss closed-door diplomacy. But now the hunt for the enemy pilot begins. The search for the U.S. pilot focused on a mountainous region in Iran's southwestern province of Khogyali and Boyer Ahmad. Neither the White House nor the Pentagon released information, but in an email from the Pentagon obtained by the AP, the military said it received notification of an aircraft being shot down in the Middle East, without further details. A U.S. crew member was rescued, but the Pentagon notified the U.S. House Armed Services Committee that the status of a second service member wasn't known. In a telephone interview with NBC News, Trump said that what happened wouldn't affect negotiations with Iran. The last time a U.S. warplane was shot down by enemy fire in combat was an A-10 Thunderbolt II during the 2003 U.S. invasion of Iraq, said retired Air Force Brigadier General Houston Cantwell, a former F-16 fighter pilot. But he said that's largely because the U.S. has been fighting insurgents who didn't have the same anti-aircraft capabilities. The fact that there have not been warfighter jets lost in Iran, Cantwell said, is a testament to the capabilities of U.S. forces. The fact that this hasn't happened until now is an absolute miracle, said Cantwell, who served 4 combat tours and is now a senior resident fellow at the Mitchell Institute for Aerospace Studies. We're flying combat missions here, there, and they're being shot at every day. Separately, Iranian state media said a U.S. A-10 attack aircraft crashed in the Persian Gulf after being struck by Iran's defense forces. A U.S. official who spoke on condition of anonymity to discuss a sensitive military situation said it wasn't clear if the aircraft crashed or was shot down. The crew status was not immediately known. An anchor on a channel affiliated with Iranian state media urged residents to hand over, quote, any enemy pilot to police, a first in the war. Iran previously made claims about shooting down piloted aircraft that turned out to not be true. But what of Oracle's offices? The Dubai headquarters of Oracle was hit after Iran's paramilitary Revolutionary Guard threatened the firm. Footage verified by the AP outside of the United Arab Emirates showed a large hole in the building's southwestern corner. The Sheikhdom's Dubai media office, which speaks for its government, noted, quote, a minor incident caused by debris from an aerial interception that fell on the facade, saying there were no injuries. Oracle Corp, based in Austin, Texas, didn't immediately respond to a request for comment. The Guard has accused some large U.S. tech companies of being involved in terrorist espionage operations against the Islamic Republic and called them legitimate targets. Amazon Web Services facilities in the UAE and Bahrain were hit in earlier drone strikes. But it's a veiled threat. Iran's paramilitary speaker, Mohammad Baghir Kalbif, issued a veiled threat late Friday to disrupt traffic through a second strategic waterway in the region, the Bab el-Mandeb. The strait, 20 miles wide, links the Red Sea with the Gulf of Aden and the Indian Ocean. More than a tenth of seaborne global oil and a quarter of container ships pass through it. What share of global oil, LNG, wheat, rice, and fertilizer shipments transit the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, Kalbaf said, referring to liquefied natural gas, which countries and companies account for the highest transit volumes through the strait. More than 1,900 people have been killed in Iran since the war began. In Gulf Arab states and the occupied West Bank, more than 24 have died, while 19 have been reported dead in Israel and 13 U.S. service members have been killed. In Lebanon, more than 1,400 people have been killed, and there have been more than 1 million people displaced. 10 Israeli soldiers have died as well. Oil-rich province threatening to splinter Canada. Even as President Trump threatens to absorb Canada, some Alberta voters are determined to break it apart. A long-simmering secession drive in the oil-rich province appears poised to reach the ballot this year, asking residents whether to stick with the rest of Canada or strike out on their own. Alberta would become a landlocked nation of 5 million people, controlling one of the world's largest reserves of crude oil. It's still considered a long shot, but should the secessionists succeed, the implications for the rest of Canada would be dire. Prime Minister Mark Carney is banking on oil exports to survive Trump's trade war and keep Canada's U.S.-dependent economy afloat. A portion of Alberta's oil wealth also helps prop up the budget of less prosperous provinces, a fact many Albertans resent. The resentment is fueling a petition drive to place secession on an October ballot, with just 177,732 signatures required by May to trigger a public vote. The number is considered such a low bar, representing 6% of the voting age population. Even some opponents say they fully expect the measure to be at the ballot. Trump has often talked about making Canada the 51st state, and leaders of the secession drive say they've met with members of his administration, without ever revealing who. Some of the movement's supporters say they'd be happy for Alberta to join the U.S., though the question wouldn't be on the ballot. Still, the grievances fueling secession talk are real enough that both the Liberal Carney and Alberta's Conservative Premier Danielle Smith are working to diffuse them. They reached an agreement in November that could lead to new pipelines to export the province's crude and are trying to convince Albertans that Ottawa is finally giving them more respect. Our agenda is to do what we can try to give Albertans hope again and to try to address some of the very real pressure points that have disaffected so many, Smith said. I'm seeking a sovereign Alberta within a united Canada, and I'm doing everything I can to make Canada work. However, Smith's party is one of the main reasons secession may face a vote. Smith, a former talk show host and lobbyist, cleared the path to a plebiscite by slashing the threshold for how many signatures trigger a referendum and giving organizers more time to get their petitions signed. Unlike other Albertans, a majority of her party's voters either back secession or are leaning toward it, according to polls. She also called the October 9th referendum, in which the secession question may appear alongside 9 other propositions, most concerning immigration. Smith says she's giving power to the people, but her opponents claim it's the latest instance of Smith trying to harness rebellious populist sentiments for political gain. Corey Hogan, a Liberal lawmaker representing parts of Calgary, said separatists are making headway thanks to the free range they've been given by some actors around them. The debate, he said, will split families and will scare away investors. The province, defined by rolling prairies and razor mountains, has long considered itself a place apart. It's often likened to Texas and is about the same size. Many residents chafe at federal rule from Ottawa, 1,700 miles away, protesting the redistribution of wealth to the country's east and policies that hold back development of its oil reserves, the world's 4th largest after Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, and Iran. What frustrated Albertans call Western alienation worsened under former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who passed new environmental laws. Oil production and export routes increased during his tenure, but not as fast as many Albertans wanted. Alberta is still the wealthiest province per capita, and its workers earn higher than average pay, but their wage advantage over the rest of Canada isn't as great as it used to be. The best way to get Albertans to want to stay in the country is for the economy, the Alberta economy, to be very strong, said Adam Waterous, executive chairman of Canadian oil producer Strathcona Resources Limited. When the animals are well fed, the jungle is quiet. You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. The time for our morning listeners is 9:30 a.m., and for our afternoon listeners, the time is 4:30 p.m. And now on to national news. Concerns in Nebraska surround federal health fund. Rick and Jane St. John chose to live in the small town of Creighton, Nebraska for one reason: its hospital. The couple is a child with nonverbal autism and epilepsy who requires up to 3 hospital visits a week, and Creighton's Critical Access Hospital has been a lifeline for Jane. Not only is she employed there, but 3 years ago, doctors saved her life when she contracted bacterial pneumonia. And if we had to drive the hour to Yankton, South Dakota's hospital, Rick St. John said, it could have cost her life. So the St. Johns were shocked to hear that Avera Creighton Hospital faces financial peril. A $50 billion government fund meant to transform rural health will do very little to help. It's a problem millions of Americans in rural areas are awakening to as they realize there's no windfall coming for the vulnerable hospitals near their homes. Hundreds of rural hospitals across the country are facing closures after years of funding problems. The issue was compounded last summer by the Trump administration's massive cuts to Medicaid. Outcry over the funding cuts prompted Republican lawmakers to create a $50 billion fund for rural health grants, but critics say the funding is not intended to prop up hospitals buckling under current pressure. It won't pay to keep the lights on, and it won't turn the lights back on once they've been turned off, said Dr. Ben Young, an infectious disease specialist and policy expert with public health advocacy group Wellness Equity Alliance. Rural Americans' health care worries reflect broader national concerns about access and rising prices of care as the cost of living spikes, anxieties that could prove pivotal in this year's midterms. So the cure falls short. The $50 billion Rural Health Transformation Program included in President Trump's tax and spending law last year was billed by Republicans as a way to help hospitals in rural areas. Last summer, Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. touted it as, quote, the biggest infusion in history for rural hospitals. Hospitals and health industry experts have warned that while the fund, $10 billion per year, allocated across all states for 5 years, offers some support for struggling rural hospitals, it won't save them. One reason is that the sum doesn't even come close to offsetting the $137 billion rural hospitals expect to lose over the next decade, according to health research nonprofit KFF, formerly the Kaiser Family Foundation. Millions of people are expected to lose Medicaid benefits as a result of new Medicaid work requirements going into effect in 2027, changes the Trump administration has maintained will crack down on fraud. Administrators say the new $50 billion fund is meant to transform rural health care through tech, workforce, and other innovations. Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services Administrator Dr. Mehmet Oz in a December video said, it gives states the tools to design solutions that last, not Band-Aids that fail. The White House echoed that on Wednesday, saying the fund is intended to fund big ideas to improve rural health care access long-term. State applications show a wide range of proposals. Some pitches sought to improve emergency medical services and modernize rural facilities, while others look to make school lunches healthier, expand physical fitness programs, beef up telehealth, and expand AI-driven technologies to help monitor patients. But there's also the innovation spending. Avera Creighton Hospital CEO Teresa Gunther argues her hospital is not in danger of closing, but conceded the Medicaid cuts will be painful. Medicaid cuts will have an impact to us, and we, as well as many others, will have to figure out what that looks like moving forward, she said. Her hospital hopes to get a piece of the $50 billion fund to help manage patients' chronic diseases and help with workforce costs. Nebraska, which received $218 million for the rural health grants, first installment plans to spend some $90 million on healthier food options at schools, recruiting more healthcare workers, and mobile sensors to remotely monitor chronically ill patients in rural areas, among other things. But for rural critical access hospitals at risk of closing, it offers $10 million to, quote, right-size them by getting rid of inpatient care where bed occupancy is typically low. Republican State Senator Barry DeKay said hospitals like Creighton's are vital despite its low occupancy rate. The hospital is in his district. Even his mother received life-extending care there following a hip replacement. He's worried that the Medicaid cuts could hurt all the state's rural hospitals. I'll try to be working as hard as I can to get as much money to rural hospitals, whether it's in my district or in any other rural district of the state, he said. But hospital groups are pushing back. The hospital fund has been seen pushback from hospital groups over an issue shaping up as important for the 2026 vote. The Colorado Hospital Association sent a letter in December to state lawmakers accusing them of ignoring input from rural hospitals. The Nebraska Hospital Alliance Association, which endorsed Republican U.S. Senator Deb Fischer's 2024 reelection bid based on her advocacy for rural health care, has criticized both the cuts and the $50 billion fund. Fischer voted last summer in favor of the Medicaid cuts. That and other efforts by the state to limit Medicaid spending sends a message that access to health care is not a priority, the group said. Some Republican state lawmakers across the country have expressed unease with parts of the fund and have sought ways to use it to help struggling rural hospitals. Housing market good for shoppers as war in Iran clouds the forecast. The economic fallout from the war with Iran is driving up the cost of buying a home, even as other housing market trends in many parts of the country favor home shoppers this spring. Mortgage rates have been rising since the war began as surging energy prices heighten worries about higher inflation, pushing up the yield on U.S. 10-year Treasury bonds, which lenders use as a guide to pricing home loans. As recently as the last week of February, the average rate on a 30-year mortgage dropped to just under 6%, its lowest level in more than 3.5 years. It climbed this week to 6.46%, its highest level in nearly 7 months. The conflict is also injecting more uncertainty into the U.S. economic outlook as the job market is sputtering. While rates are still down from a year ago, their recent upward trend has already led to a slowdown in mortgage applications. Further increases threaten to put a damper on home sales during what's traditionally the busiest time of the year for the housing market. The war in Iran has seriously complicated the spring season, said Joel Berner, senior economist at Realtor.com. I expect many buyers will be put off by rising rates and mounting economic uncertainty, choosing to bide their time rather than jumping on board for a purchase before rates go up. Home shoppers who can afford to buy at current mortgage rates are likely to find a more buyer-friendly housing market than this time last year. That means they'll have more leverage when negotiating with sellers who in many cases are watching their property go unsold for weeks, potentially making them more willing to lower their initial asking price or offer buyers money for closing costs, repairs, or other concessions in order to get a deal done, real estate agents say. The trend helped give home shopper Ann King a strong hand when she set her sights on a 3-bedroom, 2-bath ranch-style house in Fort Worth, Texas, listed at $275,000. The contract administrator offered $10,000 below the listing price. She also asked that the seller kick in $5,000 toward closing costs. The seller accepted and later agreed to throw in another $12,000 for repairs after a home inspection revealed roof damage. Fortunately for me, the seller was in a position they needed to sell, said King, age 57. The purchase was finalized in late February, just before the start of the conflict in the Middle East. King had hoped mortgage rates would ease further before she bought the home, but decided it made sense to buy sooner rather than risk having to compete this spring against more home buyers who could potentially trigger a bidding war, something she experienced last May when she bought a 2-bedroom, 2-bath townhouse in nearby Arlington. She locked in a 6% rate on her mortgage and plans to refinance a lower rate whenever they drop. Gaining leverage. While the inventory of homes for sale nationally is still low by historical standards, active listings, a tally that encompasses all homes on the market except those pending a finalized sale, jumped nearly 8% in February from a year earlier, according to Realtor.com. The increase varies across the U.S., with the West, Midwest, and South far outpacing the Northeast. Still, some 43 of the 50 largest metro areas had more home sales for sale in February than a year earlier, with listings up between 10% and 38.5% in many markets, including Seattle, Indianapolis, Las Vegas, Houston, and Denver. As homes take longer to sell, prices have started falling. The median listing price was down in February from a year earlier in just over half of the nation's biggest 50 metro areas, including a nearly 9% drop in Austin, Texas, and Memphis, Tennessee, and declines of more than 5% in Washington, D.C., San Diego, and Los Angeles. But it's a buyer's market if you can afford it. The U.S. housing market has been in a sales slump since 2022, when mortgage rates began to climb after pandemic-era lows. Sales of previously occupied U.S. homes were essentially flat last year, stuck at a 30-year low. They've remained sluggish this year. While the pace of home price growth has slowed or fallen in the many metro areas, affordability hurdles remain daunting for many aspiring homebuyers because wage growth has not kept up with home prices. You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio reading service. The time for our morning listeners is 9:40 a.m., and for our afternoon listeners, the time is 4:40 p.m. Now on to business news. It's the business of startups for today. 43 North winner in 2014, investing in other projects. Piyush Shrivastava was just a 19-year-old college student with a dream of starting a business when he heard about a new competition starting in Buffalo, billed as, quote, the world's largest business idea competition. The native of the Cincinnati, Ohio area and some friends had an idea for a biotechnology company that could potentially change the way we think about diagnosed cardiovascular disease, and the start of the 43 North competition in 2014 came just at the right time. Shrivastava, now 30, co-founded Genesthesis as an Ohio State University sophomore and had just begun advancing that ambitious idea, so in a way, 43 North was an answer to a prayer. Genesthesis wound up winning $250,000 as a finalist in the competition, and Shrivastava took a year off from school where he was studying biomedical science and relocated with his family to Western New York to build the company out of the 43 North incubator. It was a move that even some of the people he admired criticized at first, but what started as an idea to transform how heart rhythm disorders are treated went on to become a company that raised more than $42 billion and ultimately led to an acquisition last year. We were young and impressionable, and it seemed like a pretty rad idea for a couple of college students, said Shrivastava, who is now a venture investor and principal at the Ohio Fund, investing exclusively in high-growth companies in Ohio. We said what the heck and applied, he added. The moment we came here to pitch was exciting for us because that was when we decided that we were going to drop out of university to move to Buffalo and build this company. Joining the inaugural 43 North cohort and working to build a startup for over a decade gives him a unique perspective now as an investor. Shrivastava was also part of the founding team at Proscia, a digital pathology company based in Philadelphia that's raised more than $130 million and works with leading pharmaceutical companies in cancer research. After selling the assets to Genesthesis in the summer of 2025, Shrivastava moved into work with the Ohio Fund, which was founded by an early investor in Genesthesis. The fund started 20 months ago and has since deployed over $200 million in 32 different projects and investments. Shrivastava sees it as a way to give back to a state that gave him so much as he attempted to build Genesthesis. He ultimately moved back to Ohio after spending a year in Buffalo and returned to Ohio State University for the rest of his sophomore year after taking a one-year leave to fulfill his commitment to 43 North. I grew up there, so it gave me my start, so there's certainly a commitment and a flywheel effect that I want to be part of and give back to, he said. It's also opportunistic. It's not just because I love Ohio. There's also tremendous economic opportunity, and someone should capitalize on it. Buffalo still holds a special place in his heart, though. It's where he started building momentum for developing a way to find personalized diagnoses and treatment of heart rhythm conditions. The Genesthesis system uses a device to measure electrochemical activity through the skin, then analyze it using software to determine the best drugs to use as a treatment. The large instrument was first conceived in the 1960s in Syracuse, but the technology had never been refined for current clinical and practical use. It was fun to see how people became more enthusiastic as we started breaking down these milestones, from clinical trials to getting the FDA to approve the device, and starting to scale some of the commercial footprint, Shrivastava said recently from the 43 North offices of Seneca One. 43 North was the first money that went into Genesthesis and helped the startup build its first prototypes. The company continued to raise funds through a seed round in 2016 and then went on to a more traditional medical device commercial play with larger raises that spanned an array of national institutional investors. Early investors included billionaire Mark Cuban, who provided $350,000 for the startup in 2016. Shrivastava said the company was very thoughtful about spending every dollar of the $42 million it raised while working in a deeply regulated industry. We spent the money as if it were our own and very effectively and efficiently, he said. A lot of people believed in us to go out and create something valuable, and then there's nothing more humbling than that. Coming full circle now as both an operator and investor, Srivastava is looking to fund future founders with a similar mindset to invest in and support. While in Buffalo, he met the latest 43 North cohort and others working at Seneca One, and he also sees the potential for founders in Western New York. I think there's a very ripe group of companies building incredible things here, Srivastava said. They're highly investable and extremely motivated. It's exciting, and it's a pretty infectious attitude. Now on to personal finance. Average FICO scores dip. Missed student loan payments continue to hurt Americans' average credit score, but the pain is evenly distributed according to the credit scoring company FICO. The national FICO score, or three-digit number used to summarize your credit report, fell a point to 714 from April 2025 and 2 points from October 2024, the company said in its latest FICO score credit insights report. This was driven primarily by resumed student loan delinquency reporting and a slight uptick in mortgage delinquencies, FICO said. Declining scores can be concerning because lenders use them to decide whether to approve loans and credit cards and determine interest rates and credit limits. A record 48.1% of consumers now have FICO scores of 750 or higher, reflecting the K-shaped economy. Economic improvement is uneven, with some people moving up while others continue to move down or struggle. The result is a credit market that's both more challenging for some and more rewarding for others, a dynamic that's more nuanced strategies from lenders, said Ethan Dornhelm, head of scores and analytics at FICO. FICO scores range from 300 to 850, with a lower score suggesting a higher risk to lenders. So who's feeling the pressure? The share of Gen Z, defined in FICO's report as 18 to 29-year-olds, saw at least a 50-point decrease in their FICO scores, jumping to 14.4% from 11.3% between October 24 and 2025. That compares to an increase of 10.1% from 8.8% from the overall population, FICO said. This is likely due to ongoing issues with student loan repayment, the report said. Student loan delinquencies put the most pressure on the average FICO score as repayments and reporting resumed at the end of 2024, but that's stabilizing, FICO said. Nearly one-third, or 7.1 million student loan borrowers who had a payment saw a new delinquency reported on their credit file, FICO said. That pushed their credit scores on average down 62 points since January 2025. After severe delinquency on student loans took a big jump in April due to resumption of delinquency reporting, there was a 0.1% increase in student loan delinquencies between April and October 25, it said. So what are people doing? Market speculation suggests Gen Z has shifted away from traditional credit cards in favor of alternative lending products, particularly buy now, pay later, FICO said. The data tells a different story, though. A higher percentage of Gen Zers open new bank cards than any other age group, which in reality positions them as the most active cohort in traditional credit card adoption. More credit cards doesn't mean they spend recklessly. Instead, findings point to a shift in how consumers relate to credit. It's no longer passive, it's intentional, said Janelle Dito, Vice President of Consumer Empowerment Programs and Partnerships at FICO. People are monitoring their credit and thinking strategically. When applying for a credit card, 77% of Americans consider interest rates, and 29% said they won't apply unless rates drop to a certain point, FICO said. As part of our newspaper reading, we now present the day's death listings. If you need further information on any of these names, call us at 716-821-5555. That number again being 716-821-5555. Lori Ann Acquisito, Helen Anderson ni Edinger, Ronald A. Babcock, Mamie M. Ballin ni Fior, Patricia Patsy Bergman Young ni Masca, Joseph Bova, Sister Patricia Burkhardt OSF, Esther Linda Clouden ni Russo, Mary Patricia Collins, Patricia Pantera de Sessa, Jack D. Doman, Joanne C. Dugo, Louis R. Fabiano, Esther E. Fink ni Guzikowski, Michael J. Fizark, Madeline Mitzi Fuller, nee Shea. Patsy A. Gentile. Catherine R. Golan, nee Keeves. Catherine R. Guthiel. Holly D. Hamilton. Anne Marie Hines, nee Stone. Caroline Irvine, nee Dominic. Lisa Johnson. Florence S. Karolewski, nee Sudniski. Dorothy Keller, nee Dill. Karen Klink. Gary Kozatrua. Mark A. Kowalitz. Charles R. Kramer. Stephen Kubiak. Robert LaDuca. Timothy A. Lang. J. D. Liederstorff. Kathy L. Lee, nee Sitniewski. Benita G. Leone, nee Seidlowski. Deborah Denise Major. Linda Marenka. Robert Marenka. Daniel J. Mazur. Donald McGowan. Robert J. Mueller. Charles A. Odo. Daniel Thomas O'Neill. Kelly E. Panjak, nee McCarney. Lucy Poloni. Dolores Rose Peters, nee Pirioni. Sandra A. Postelis, nee Militello. Dorothy M. Rutledge, Scanlon. Judith Ann Scalia, nee Kapelas. Joseph J. Schiavi. Mary Hefner Sciallo. Claire A. Seelig. Gretchen Schumacher, nee Klausman. Edward Joseph Sheehy. Grace M. Sinacropi, nee Perino. Mary Eileen Summers, nee Fernan. Mary Judith Judy Swiderski, nee Ennis. Aaron M. Taylor, nee Culligan. Ronald C. Viters. Patricia S. Vogan, nee Van Duzer. Dorothy A. Zamuda. If you need further information on any of these names, please call us at 716-821-5555. That number again being 716-821-5555. And now on to the horoscopes. It's Royal Stars from Georgia Nichols. Happy birthday for Sunday, April 5th, 2026. You're an intellectual visionary who is methodical. You're admired for your strength of purpose. This is an exciting year of new beginnings and adventures. The stars show the kind of day you'll have, with 5 being dynamic, 4 being positive, 3 is average, 2 is so-so, and 1 is just difficult. For Aries, you're having a 2-star day. Today it's easy to fall into the position that you are right and that your way is the way. Be careful about this, because it could lead to disputes. Tonight, explore. For Taurus, a 3-star day. Be gentle with partners and close friends today. People are enthusiastic, but they might overstep their boundaries. Tonight, check your finances. Gemini, a 3-star day. You have a lot of energy to get things done, but you might come on too strong for others. This is an accident-prone day, perhaps because unexpected events will catch some people off guard, creating distractions that are hard to deal with. Go gently. Tonight, listen. For Cancer, a 3-star day. Parents should be vigilant today because this is an accident-prone day for your kids. Nevertheless, you're surrounded by high energy that's keen to socialize. Tonight, work. Leo, a 2-star day. Steer clear of discussions about controversial subjects today. This could lead to arguments. Meanwhile, at home, small appliances might break down or minor breakage could occur. Tonight, socialize. For Virgo, it's a 2-star day. Pay attention to everything you say and do because this is an accident-prone day. In discussions with others, caution about leaping to conclusions. Tonight, cocoon. Libra, it's a 3-star day. Today you have the energy to work and get things done. The thing to know is that you need to protect your belongings against loss, theft, or damage. Tonight, discussions. For Scorpio, a 3-star day. Don't be too quick to react today, and yet you also have to be ready for surprises and disruptions. Tonight, check your belongings. Sagittarius, this is a restless day. Social outings might initially be enthusiastic and upbeat, but they could get out of hand or become too rambunctious. Tonight, you're strong. Capricorn, a 2-star day. Someone might surprise you today, or you might meet a real character. Family discussions will be lively. Tonight, privacy. Aquarius, be patient with patience and authority figures today. People might leap to conclusions or interrupt you. Tonight, friendships. And Pisces, it's a 2-star day. Be mindful about your surroundings and what you're doing today, because this is an accident-prone day. Tonight, you are noticed. And today in history, on this day, April 5th, in 1614, Pocahontas, the daughter of Senecomach, Chief Powhatan, married Englishman John Rolfe, a widower in the Virginia colony. In 1887, in Tuscumbia, Alabama, teacher Anne Sullivan achieved a breakthrough as her 6-year-old deafblind pupil, Helen Keller, learned the meaning of the word water as spelled out in the manual alphabet. In 1933, as part of the New Deal programs, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed an executive order establishing the Civilian Conservation Corps, or the CCC, a Depression-era work relief program for single men ages 18 to 25. It employed more than 2.5 million men for federal conservation and safety projects over its 9-year history. In 1986, 2 American servicemen and a Turkish woman were killed in the bombing of the West Berlin discotheque, an incident that prompted a U.S. air raid on Libya. In 1991, former Senator John Tower, Republican of Texas, his daughter Marion, and 21 other people were killed in a commuter plane crash near Brunswick, Georgia. In 1994, Nirvana lead singer Kurt Cobain died by suicide in a Seattle, Washington home at age 27. And in 2010, a massive coal dust explosion ripped through the Upper Big Branch mine near Charleston, West Virginia, killing 29 workers in the worst U.S. coal mining disaster in 40 years. And now on to a bit of the political notebook. Alito treated at hospital, Supreme Court reveals. Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito fell ill at an event in Philadelphia last month and was treated for dehydration before returning home to suburban Washington, the court's spokeswoman said Friday. Alito's illness did not require an overnight hospital stay, and he was back on the bench the following Monday, spokeswoman Patricia McCabe said in a statement. Alito, age 76, is the second oldest member of the court after 77-year-old Justice Clarence Thomas. The episode was first reported by CNN, which also said the treatment was administered at a Philadelphia hospital. The court did not say where Alito had been taken. Alito was driven by his security detail from Washington to what CNN said was a dinner by the Federalist Society panel that looked at his 20 years on the court. When he didn't feel well in the evening, he agreed with his security detail's recommendation to see a physician before the 3-hour drive home to Northern Virginia, McCabe said. He was given fluids for dehydration. While the justice has not said anything about retirement, speculation has swirled that Alito might soon step down, which would give President Trump the chance to appoint a 4th justice after Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett were confirmed during his first term. While Alito is young by Supreme Court standards, he might not want to stay around and gamble on the possibility of Democrats flipping the Senate in the November midterm elections and see a Democrat capture the White House 2 years later. Retiring in the summer would allow Trump to name a similarly conservative but much younger replacement who would almost certainly win confirmation from the Republican-led Senate. You are listening to a reading of articles from the Buffalo News for April 6th on your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. April 5th. We'll return for more readings after this short break. Your reader for the first hour has been Edwin J. Vieira, and for the second hour, your reader will be Ron Bickelman. Thank you for listening, and stay tuned.
If you're listening to this publication online, you're probably using our website, a podcast player like Spotify or iTunes, a streaming service like Siro, or a smart speaker. Did you know that we now have a dedicated app that can be downloaded to any mobile device, like a smartphone or tablet, for free? App users can conveniently access our live stream and any episode of our podcast easier than ever. To download the app, just type NFRRS in the search window in the Apple App Store or in the Google Play Store. Contact us anytime if you have any questions by calling 716-821-5555, extension 5. Thank you.
articles from today's Buffalo News. Your reader is Ron Bickelman. Candidate Thompson doesn't cite tax woes. A former New York State Senator who represented Buffalo and once owed the IRS $56,289 in back taxes is now living in Maryland and seeking election to Maryland's House of Delegates. A spokesman for Antoine Thompson said Friday that the Democrats' financial problems are behind him as he campaigns for the position of delegate in Maryland's 25th delegate district south of Baltimore. Thompson's campaign website tells voters that he is a proven leader, housing and jobs advocate, and environmental champion, but does not tell voters that the IRS filed federal tax liens against him in 2013, 14, 15, and 18. The former Buffalo resident served as a Common Council member from 2001 until 2006, and he won an election to represent both the 60th District and the State Senate, which included parts of Buffalo, Niagara Falls, and sections of Erie and Niagara counties. He held the post for 2 terms, leaving after 2010. In 2014, Thompson ran unsuccessfully to represent Buffalo in the state assembly. He told the Buffalo News in September of 2014 that he had worked out a 3-year payment plan to pay off the $56,000 he owed the IRS. During life, we all have upsets, Thompson said in September of 2014 interview. Some people give up, some people stand back up. I stood back up. I am paying all my bills. Thompson declined to speak with a news reporter, but his campaign spokesman, Joshua Harris, said Friday he believes all Thompson's tax liens have been satisfied. To our knowledge, all the past tax due matters were fully resolved. They have been no late tax payments in the past decade, and we are not aware of any outstanding balances in New York or Maryland or elsewhere, Harris said. When asked by the News whether Maryland voters should be aware of Thompson's past tax problems and whether he can guarantee voters that those problems are permanently behind him, Harris did not comment. During a 2014 interview with the News, Thompson said most of his financial problems track back with his income dropped after he left the Senate and turned to his business and entrepreneurial work. Thompson explained further that some of his tax problems were related to his vehicle mileage expenses in Buffalo area during his years as a state senator. I had logs, but not as accurate as they wanted. We worked out a payment agreement, he said during a 2014 interview. There are 2 more years left. The IRS office that handles news media inquiries declined Friday to discuss Thompson's tax liens or to confirm or deny that the liens have been all satisfied. An IRS spokesman said the tax agency does not release information on whether money is owed by taxpayers. Thompson, 56, lists an address in Upper Marlboro Road, Maryland, where real estate records show he purchased a home for $425,000 in 2020. Thompson is seeking election in Maryland's House of Delegates, which is the lower house of Maryland's General Assembly. The job he is seeking pays $56,636 annually. According to the state, delegates also receive per diem payments, $188 per day for all housing and meals during the 3 months each year that the delegates are in session. Thompson's campaign website touts his experience as an elected official in Buffalo and one of the reasons why voters should elect him in Maryland. Since moving to Maryland, Antoine has continued to fight for working families, testifying before the Maryland General Assembly and leading coalitions to advance policies that expand opportunity. He has been a strong voice on foreclosure prevention, recognizing that home ownership remains one of the most powerful ways families can build generational wealth. Living in Maryland's Prince George District since 2014, Antoine Thompson also serves as the CEO and Executive Director of the Greater Washington Region Clean Cities Coalition, which is advocating daily for cleaner transportation, environmental justice, and workforce development. The website says Thompson is also a realtor and a dedicated member of and fundraiser for the South County Democratic Club. He and his wife Tracy are partners in Creative PMO Solutions, a consulting firm focused on diversity, workforce deployment, project management and public affairs, according to the website. The site also identifies Thompson as a member of the 100 Black Men of Prince George County, a Silver Life member of NAACP. Maryland state elections are held on November 3rd of this year. Continuing along now in local news, region's shrinking job market adds to a cycle of pessimism. It's tough to thrive when you keep getting smaller. That is the problem the Buffalo and Niagara County economy faces. Our jobs base is steadily shrinking. A new and more accurate report Thursday from the state Labor Department and region has about 2,100 fewer jobs than originally reported, and even hiring continued as moderate pace last year. Jobs are what provides the fuel for the regional economy. The more jobs we add, the more fuel there is to businesses to grow. More jobs mean more paychecks mean more money for consumers to spend. And more money by consumers means businesses are more interested in hiring more workers or making investments to help them expand. It's a virtuous cycle that feeds on itself, but with fewer jobs, the fuel supply gets tight. With fewer people earning paychecks, there aren't as many consumers buying groceries and cars, dining at restaurants, or planning a vacation. That fuels a not-so-virtuous cycle that also feeds on itself, and businesses turn cautious and maybe even cut back. The good news is that revised data indicates that the local job market is still growing, adding jobs at 1.3% annual pace last year. But in the bigger picture, the growth is still modest, and the revisions mostly changed the timing when the hiring occurred, slashing the pace of hiring in 2024 to a mere 0.1%. And in January, the region lost another 700 jobs, the report said. But it's not just a slump in hiring that's hurting the region. Before the pandemic, when the region's shroud of perpetual pessimism had given way to welcome sense that things were finally turning around, more people, primarily refugees, had started moving into the region. That gave the local economy a fuel source that it had lacked for decades. More people mean more consumer spending, even if many of those people took entry-level jobs, said Timothy Glass, the Labor Department's regional economist in Buffalo. Those new people and the jobs they took on helped the region's job market expand to record levels just before the pandemic, Glass said. They provided a built-in source of growth for businesses that, during decades when Buffalo Niagara's population was dropping, had to survive in a market where only new customers could win as the ones they had poached from a competitor. When the population is rising, those new people can now become new customers without even poaching. There was new demand from new population moving into the area, said Julie Ann Goblewski, a Canisius University economist. But now Buffalo Niagara's people problem has returned. We've lost 11,200 residents over the past 5 years, a decline of up 1%, according to the latest census estimates for 2025. That means the new demand for consumer-oriented business across the region, also enjoyed so briefly during the 2010s, has shriveled. The investment boom that fueled much of the optimism before the pandemic has dried up, partly for reasons of the region's control. Building materials cost a lot more now, so that has made projects harder to do. Interest rates have shot up. That makes projects more costly to finance. Lenders have turned cautious, which makes those more costly loans harder to get. And then there's Douglas Jamal, Washington, D.C. developer, hit Buffalo Niagara like a whirlwind a decade ago with big plans and the money to carry them out. He bet big on Buffalo, encouraged other local developers to step up with their own projects, but Jamal, whose money comes from big real estate holdings in Washington, also has been hurt by the changing economy. Cutbacks in Washington by federal government have further sapped his financial resources. And the temperamental Jamal also ticked off that government officials haven't been stepped up to help him, especially on his risky Statler Hotel renovation project. Now he has taken some hits. So Jamal is pulling back, selling off much of his Buffalo holdings, creating a huge void. If not Jamal, who else has the vision, wherewithal to make this kind of investment he envisioned to bring to people and a sense of vibrancy back to Buffalo? And the national economy is slowing with a low fire job market, roaring gasoline prices, and a shakier consumer confidence, and an ongoing sense of political uncertainty after a year of tariffs and shifting policy. Consumer confidence crossed Upstate New York has dropped to its lowest level since the spring of 2022, according to a survey released Thursday by Siena Research Institute. New Yorkers are pulling back on their spending, but they are not increasing their spending, said Travis Broadbeck, the Institute's associate director. And that residents are staying the course and spending more cautiously. And that survey was taken the first half of March, just as the war in Iraq was getting underway, when the gasoline prices were in the early stages of their rise to nearly $4 a gallon. For decades, it's been true that when the national economy gets cold, Buffalo Niagara comes down with pneumonia and has a much longer recovery. It happened during COVID-19, when all our job losses were much worse than the rest of the country, and still incomplete recovery has taken years longer. Revised job markets show that we are still down 6,700 jobs to pre-pandemic levels, when the nation had long since recovered and has gained 4% more. If Buffalo Niagara has managed to recover at the same pace as the rest of the country, we would have 23,000 more jobs than we do now. That's a lot of paychecks and consumer spending that we're missing out of. It's a sobering situation, a sad one too, after briefly experiencing the high that comes from a sense of momentum and optimism, but it's not unfamiliar to the Buffalo Niagara residents. We know what the problems are, we just haven't figured out a solution. Continuing with local news, third trial on tap for same suspect in 1993 City of Tonawanda murder of a young mother. Someone strangled and stabbed Deborah Mendel to death in her City of Tonawanda home in the winter afternoon 33 years ago. On Monday, for the third time since Mendel's death, Brian Scott Lorenz will go on trial. Jury selection is scheduled for Monday before State Supreme Court Justice Paul Wojtaszek. Following the mistrial in the Lorenz case last year, jurors were also picked to weigh the evidence. In the latest case, we'll hear that from a new witness who hasn't testified at either trial, a man locked up with Lorenz who claims Lorenz confessed to the murder. Jurors will not hear from a woman who took a mysterious phone call hours before Mendel was killed, warning that Mendel's life is in danger, according to defense attorneys. 1993 convictions of Lorenz and James Pugh were thrown out in 2023 after the attorneys obtained new DNA analysis and found a piece of evidence was withheld in prosecution. Since Lorenz's second trial, during which defense attorneys questioned the quality of the original investigation by City of Tonawanda Police, ended in early October in a mistrial due to a deadlocked jury, prosecutors dropped the charges against Pugh. Given the length of time since the killing, prosecutors faced challenges proving their case beyond a reasonable doubt, namely because many of the witnesses who testified at the first trial in 1994 are dead. In last year's trial, jurors will have testimony from some of the now deceased witnesses from first trial read to them. Prosecutors also won't allow a key piece of physical evidence from the first trial, a coin found in Lorenz's possession that authorities believed was stolen from Mendel's home. A prosecutor's note about the coin that the father of Mendel's husband, Donald, couldn't identify the coin was not provided to defense attorneys at the original trial. The error, in addition to the new DNA evidence, formed the basis for the decision of overturning convictions. After the first retrial, one of the jurors who voted to acquit Lorenz told the Buffalo News any further prosecution was unlikely to succeed because of the glaring areas that caused doubt in the prosecution's case. Lorenz's defense attorney will be able to argue that the two other people, Donald Mendel and another man who reportedly confessed to the crime years later, may have been responsible for the crime. The defense attorneys, again, have been prohibited from arguing a theory developed out of the district attorney's office reinvestigation of the case before the original convictions were vacated, that a police detective who investigated Mendel's slaying and notorious prison escapee Richard Matt may have been involved in Mendel's killing. Role of DNA. On February 17, 1993, Deborah Mendel was found dead on the dining room floor of the Franklin Street home around 3 p.m. by her 10-year-old daughter, who had just returned from school. Mendel had been strangled by her husband's necktie and stabbed 10 times with a kitchen knife. Thanks to DNA testing performed around 2019, which is part of led to Lorenz's trial original conviction being thrown out 3 years ago, Lorenz's defense attorney will be able to tell the jury that none of the DNA found at the crime scene were their clients. Lorenz's attorneys won a court order Wednesday to have the DNA evidence to have DNA from the crime scene evidence entered into the state database, but that effort fell short. The attorney representing Erie County Central Police Services Forensic Laboratory explained to the court that the type of samples provided by a defense expert were not the type eligible to be entered into the database. What's in and what's out? James R. Fox, 35, a man who was incarcerated with Lorenz, claims Lorenz confessed to him. He's expected to be called the prosecution witness. He testified at a hearing March 30th that he'd been in custody in Erie County Sheriff's for about 7 months on parole violation. Lorenz's reported confession came sometime in 2019 or 2020 while the two were housed at Auburn Correctional Facility. Fox said at the time he was serving a sentence for burglary conviction. Fox also said he was charged with possession of prison contraband, a charge that could land him significant further prison time because of his record. About a week or two before he reached out to Erie County prosecutors in early March about what Lorenz, who he knew as a Scotty, said to him during 7 years ago. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 16 minutes after the hour. Is milk less expensive than it was in the 80s? Americans have made clear to politicians that the rising prices are a major concern, but has milk escaped inflationary pressure? That's what a New York congressional candidate recently said. Blake Gendabiden, a farmer seeking the Democratic nomination in New York's 21st Congressional District, wants to replace Republican Elise Stefanik, who decided not to seek re-election. In a January 30th ex-post, Gendabine wrote that milk prices currently are no higher than they were in the 80s, even as fuel, feed, and equipment costs keep climbing. A spokesman for Gendabine's office, Georgia Greenleaf, pointed Political Fact New York to federal price data. We looked at the numbers and found that Gendabine had a point, although the comparison needs some explanation. The federal government's Bureau of Labor Statistics had tracked the price of milk since January of 80 until June of 95. It measured price per half gallon. During the July 1995, it measured the price per gallon. To make the data series comparable over a full period, we multiplied the half gallon prices from January of 80 to June of 95 by 2 and kept the subsequent data the same at 1 gallon. That isn't a perfect adjustment, since purchasing larger quantities of an item often leads to a bit of a price break, but a reasonable estimate. Now we've divided each month's per gallon price by January of 1990 price to show how much it has risen from that baseline. The calculation shows that the price of milk has roughly doubled from $2.03 to $4.03 per gallon since January of 1980. If you look at the price of milk in isolation, it hasn't stayed constant since the 80s, but if you compare the rise in the price of milk to overall consumer price inflation, the most reasonable way of measuring price change is over a 46-year period. Milk has risen in price by far less than any other items have. From January of 80 to February of 2026, overall consumer prices have more than quadrupled, but twice as fast as milk prices have risen since January of 80. Alan Berga, National Milk Producers Federation Executive Vice President of Communications and Industry Relations, agreed that today's prices are lower in real dollars. The main reason is greater efficiency at the farm level, experts said, according to the Council on Dairy Cattle Breeding. U.S. dairy cattle produce 4 times as much milk per cow in 2021 as in 1945, and twice as much as in 1970. Increase stems from improvements in genetic selection and herd management, the Council found. Because the average cow produces more milk in 2026, Berger said, the average farmer has much more milk to sell. With greater supply comes lower prices. Our ruling. Gerdabin said milk prices are currently no higher than they were in the 80s. That's not the case using nominal dollars, but few products stay the same in price over more than 4 decade span. When comparing prices over a period that long, economists typically factor in overall consumer price inflation. Using that method, milk has seen price increases far below that of overall consumer prices. Milk prices have roughly doubled since 1980 compared to a rough quadrupling of consumer prices overall. In that context, it's reasonable to say milk prices are no higher than they were in the 80s. The statement is accurate, but needs additional information, so we rate it mostly true. Fan Store is seeing a run on blue and gold merchandise, or black and red gear too, as Sabres finally head to playoffs. Nathan Moroz opened the Buffalo store in 2012. For virtually all those years, Buffalo Sabres gears was almost negligible, Moroz says. But with the Sabres enjoying success unseen here in 15 years, the trajectory of sales and Sabres gear has reversed. Items at the store couldn't give away just several years ago are now flying off the shelves at places that sell official Sabres merchandise like the Buffalo store and other Buffalo-centric stores selling hockey-themed gear, trinkets, and other swag. Sales numbers for Sabres items are almost up 30% from last season at Buffalo store, 4 locations, and from online purchasers nationally and in Canada. There's also newfound appreciation and desire for Sabres items, including gear with nostalgic theme from the 90s and early 2000s when the fandom had more to cheer about. It's had a similar feel to when the Bills broke their 17-year playoff drought in 2017, then continued that success behind the rise of Josh Allen. I'd love to showcase everything about Buffalo, not just one particular team, but it would have been frustrating to bring in Sabres items and you could just see the community was a little sour and had a temperature for purchasing. And the temperature for purchasing that type of stuff was down substantially, said Moroz, whose store was the official retailer for the Sabres from 2022 to 2025. I think the hunger never really went away, but it was like, hey, I'm not talking to you right now, but I'm going eventually to come back and you get right. It's kind of like a relationship. Fans, some who have been less than vocal or public about their Sabres love for years, are again proud to put on their Sabres jerseys, many of them fawning over team merchandise. Totally Buffalo store welcomed a couple visiting Western New Yorkers from Cleveland who came in to shop Thursday specifically for Sabres gear. That's happening often this season for the store, which sells hockey-themed items. The proof that the fans are back can be seen clearly around the KeyBank Center. The arena has not only sold out for the last 15 home games, but the Sabres have drastically improved their sales numbers for retail and game day merchandise. Sales at Buffalo stores are up 25% from last season. As of March, that includes a boost from the online Olympic merchandise, primarily focusing on Team USA gold medalist Tage Thompson and those beer sales that sold out quickly and took on a life of their own. Anything we put out, the response has been overwhelming, Pete Coelho, president of business operations for the Sabres, said last month. Dave and Adam, which sell licensed Sabres apparel, also sees a huge uptick in sales around Sabres products and merchandise, according to Chris Bordura, Director of Media and Public Relations and Athlete Relations for Dave and Adams. What's selling? Rose said he has been selling a lot of nostalgic gear that pays homage to the last great Sabres teams from 2005 and 6 to 2006 and 7, when Buffalo advanced to the Eastern Conference Finals. The Sabres celebrated the 20th anniversary of the 25-26 team earlier this season, creating even more of that buzz. Team merchandise sales actually began a bit of an upward climb when the Sabres introduced their throwback black and red goat head jersey as an alternate uniform beginning of the 2022-23 season. That year, the team fell short of the playoffs by a point. There's a spark coming back, and people are coming back to stores. Other items that are selling are crew necks, sweatshirts, t-shirts, hats, polos, and ties, as well as accessories like earrings, hair products, and socks. Sabres flags and lawn signs are also popular as fans want to show their support of the team outside their homes. We've seen this before. Moroz said that this type of significant climb in sales has a similar feel to the momentum that occurred for the Bills apparel when the team broke a 17-year playoff drought in 2017. I'll never forget when the Bills broke the drought. It absolutely was bedlam, Moroz says. Now we've got similar hype. Moroz is noticing that fans may have been content during the drought year to wear the same jersey from years to years. Now eager to get new jerseys. They're freshening up their wardrobe, Monroe says. Some of them have been quite some time. Playoff sales boost. Monroe is ready to put together a whole line of custom-made exclusive playoff pieces that he sees increasing sales numbers up to 80%. The Sabres run also the same huge boost during a normally slow time for retailers in the spring and inflation as gas prices on the rise, Monroe said. Feels like the floodgates are opening and excitement is being unleashed, especially the first day after we clinched the playoffs, Monroe said. Bondura also anticipates Easter holiday. It has been a very busy time for Dave and Adams as out-of-town Buffalonians come back home to see their family and rekindle the love for the hometown hockey team. Sabres fans can almost help themselves at this point when you're talking about a drought that's been that long. I think people are clamoring for some new and fun playoff end-of-the-drought themed stuff. Frioni Solani said.
Now let's look at our Asking Eric column. Brother wants nephews left with sister at reception. Dear Eric, my brother-in-law, 41, is the last of 4 siblings to get married. He invited the family to his wedding. However, this is a destination wedding, and he said he would like to have nephews and nieces participate in the ceremony, but the children had to be taken to their babysitters after the ceremony and not be present at the reception. We have 2 boys, and I'm not comfortable with leaving them at a hotel room or house rental with a babysitter that we don't know. My husband is a groomsman. I would guess and not part of the wedding party like my sons and husband. The other 2 siblings are also married with children, and they are part of the wedding party, but their respective husbands and wives are not. How can I support my husband to participate in his brother's wedding if I'm not comfortable leaving our kids with a stranger at a strange place? Should I just take the kids with me after the ceremony and let my husband be at the reception? Taking a nanny with us and paying her trip would be beyond our budget. We are already paying for a trip we didn't ask for. I have to purchase outfits for the boys. I feel my hands are tied and I don't know how to set my boundary without seemingly indelicate to the marrying couple and unsupportive of my husband. My brother had a disagreement a couple of years ago. The brothers had a disagreement a couple of years ago, and their friendship has suffered a rift. Future wife and I are not friends. How do I conduct myself without being rude? Wedding guest. Nothing you're considering strikes me as rude. While I can see the marrying couple's logic in providing a sitter instead of having kids at the reception, it's more than reasonable for you to want to be able to keep your eye on your kids. You know who is minding them. It's fine for you to say, I'm just not comfortable having my kids with a stranger, and it's going to impact my enjoyment at the event. So if I want to go, I want to go a different way. The smoothest path for you to talk this through with your husband and make sure you're on the same page, and then come up with a plan of action that works for everyone. It's a shame that you'd miss the reception, but that seems like the easiest path and could give you a respite from an event that you may have less fun for you, be less fun for you. The other option is to leave the kids at home with a trusted sitter. That might save you on some money. Dear Eric, love your column, and I think you give every very solid advice. I wonder if you might have missed a little on your answer to the parent of a 22-year-old who works at the parent's job but is unmotivated and doesn't complete tasks. Bad coworker. The daughter is most likely not going to listen to the parents' 2 cents on this. In fact, she is going to need the real word lesson here, I'm afraid. The person who is the daughter's supervisor is probably worried about offending the parent, who's also a coworker. First, the parent needs to go to the supervisor and basically say, throw the book at her. Give that person carte blanche and treat my daughter as you would any other employee who wasn't performing. The parent is trying to tell the daughter, we're going one ear and out the other. Second, I suspect the daughter is living at home. Well, that is the problem because she doesn't have any sense of urgency to make money. The adult needs to be treated like one that can handle her own problems. Yes, things may take a dip until she figures out that she only has herself to rely on. She needs real life consequences, or she'll find herself at 30 in the same boat. Reader. Dear reader, I appreciate your letter.
I'm a bit more tough. It's a bit more tough love for me, but I can see the value in helping the daughter to launch. What I like most is a suggestion of talking to the daughter's supervisor and giving the supervisor the okay to treat the daughter as if she would any other employee. This can be a very valuable lesson and can help make the homework distinction clearer. It's likely a murky situation for everyone involved. Best to be upfront with the others in the office so they're empowered to do their jobs and form their own professional relationships. It's 30 minutes after the hour on Niagara Falls Radio Reading Service. In sports, Buffalo News, inside the NHL, Lindy wants focus to stay on players and not his free agent status. There's still ongoing dialogue between the Sabres and winger Alex Tuch on a contract extension, but that's not the only big-name free agent the club's dealing with. Coach Lindy Ruff's 2-year contract expires July 1st, and it's notable he's the only current NHL bench boss who started the season and doesn't have a contract for next year. Ruff turned 66 in February, entered Saturday's second on the all-time win list for one team with 653 for the Sabres. El Arbor with 740 with the Islanders is first. Ruff is fourth on all-time wins list with 946, third on all-time games list with 1932. And so he could hit the 1,000 wins in 2,000 games if he comes back with a new deal. Columbus's Rick Bowness is the league's oldest coach at 71 and came on in January to replace Dean Evason. He left Winnipeg a couple of years back due to health reasons and needs a new contract for 26-27. The Jackets have played great since he came aboard, but it remains to be seen if he wants to keep the gig next season. Sabres general manager Jarmo Kukalainen inherited Ruff when he was promoted to replace Kevin Adams in December. The coach and GM talked daily about what's going on with the team, but Ruff acknowledged they have broached the subject of future as well. I can say we've already had some good discussions. Ruff said after practice on Friday in Arlington, Virginia, for me right now, it's about the players and being in the playoffs. But you can say the discussions have been great. Ruff is the only coach in the league's all-time top in victories, not to win a Stanley Cup, and that continues to be his quest. Now, with the Sabres championship window clearly opening, it seems unlikely he would walk away now. Maybe I've decided what I'm going to do, but I'm just not going to tell you, Ruff said with a big smile. My translation, Ruff is enjoying this too much and wants to return. But I also think he would ponder retirement, perhaps an administrative position in the organization if the Sabres were to win the Stanley Cup this season. I've had a lot of fun this year, put it that way. Absolutely, Ruff said. But right now the discussions are about the team and being in the playoffs, and that's the place where I want to stay. Kukalainen already had placed his imprints on the team's front office. It's likely to do the same this summer with his scouting and developmental staff, where there are plenty of expiring contracts. In December, many outside observers wondered if Kukalainen would be planning a reunion with John Tortorella, the former Columbus coach, seemed to be clearly auditioning for the Buffalo job on ESPN studio telecast in December, and saw him breaking down footage of a Sabres players. But Ruff's status quickly became a non-issue when the Sabres went on their 10-game win streak through the month. There are two big-name coaches sitting out there right now, and Peter DeBoer and Bruce Cassidy, who was excised by Vegas last week to be replaced by Tortorella. But the Sabres' rise renders a shift to either of them highly unlikely. Keep in mind that owner Terry Pegula loves Ruff, and the coach's return in 2024 was rooted in part the success he had with Dallas and Jersey after he left Buffalo. A side factor is some likely regret Pegula had surrounding the events of the Russ post-practice firing in 2013. Kukalainen has made it clear to local media since his hiring he's not talking about ongoing negotiations at any level in the organization. He also gave a polite no comment on Ruff last week to Pierre LeBrun of the TSN and The Athletic. Coaching staff's done a great job, Kukalainen told reporters last month at the trade deadline. The message has been clear all season. I think I've said it many times. There's a lot of talent and skill on this team. It's great to see it all coming together. Sometimes it takes longer for teams to figure it out, especially if the compete part and the discipline, need to compete in discipline to work as a team and not just very talented, skilled individuals. I'm really happy for the guys in the room. I think they're all really hungry to have success, and they're having it. They're getting a taste of it. I think they want more. Kirkalainen will have roster decisions to make after the season, as well as continuing the build out of the front office that already has included several hires, tapped by the addition of former Montreal General Manager Marc Bergevin. Jarmo's in charge of the hockey operation. Pete Coelho, the Bills and Sabres president of business operation, told the news last week in the league meetings in Phoenix. I think everyone is happy that it's his show to run. You know who's in charge. You know who's accountable. That's a good feeling when you have somebody as competent as Jarmo to do it, and his decisions on how we handle things from a hockey perspective. Ultimately, he's spoken with Terry and myself on that, and I'm here to support him, and those are his decisions to make.
Continuing along now, in basketball, Mavs Flag is first team to score 50. Cooper Flag didn't get a call, and his coach and teammate got kicked out of the game, trying to stick up for the number one pick of the Dallas Mavericks. Less than a quarter later, Flag, the first teenager to score 51 points in an NBA game in Dallas's 138-127 loss to Orlando Magic on Friday. Flag scored 24 points in the fourth quarter after coach Jason Kidd and forward Najee Marshall were ejected, complaining about what they thought was a no-call when Desmond Bain followed Flag. Kidd was tossed, even though he had been assessed just one technical foul, while Marshall had gotten another technical at the end of the first half. His second came moments after Kidd was thrown out. It's great to see, Flag said, after going 19 of 30 from the field and making all 7 free throws and topping his previous career high of 49 in a 123-121 loss to Charlotte January 29th. Flag exited the game with 45 points, but assistant coach Frank Vogel, filling in for Kidd, told the 19-year-old he was just resting him during a defensive possession. Vogel called the timeout to get Flag back with 3:22 remaining, and Flag made a history. A little bit more than a minute later, he missed a three-pointer the first time down, but then missed the follow-up attempt on Brandon Williams. Got a rebound and made a corner three. The next possession, he hit an off-balance shot in the lane while getting fouled to cinch 50. He made the free throw and left with a standing ovation. The Mavericks were down 30 when Flag started his fourth quarter scoring barrage, and one that ended up being a 14th consecutive home loss. It's the longest home losing streak since Dallas lost their first 19 games at since demolished Reunion Arena in 93-94. It's also fun getting back in that type of mode, Flag said. The basket feels big. My teammates are looking out for you, helping you out, but I like to win, and that's my main focus. It's hard for me to enjoy myself out there when we're down 20, down 10, down 15 the majority of the game. Flag said he thought it was obvious Bain had followed him in the opening 2 minutes of the fourth. I think it was warranted, Flag said, of Kidd's reaction. I'm not going to lie. I talked to Bain after the play, and he told me he was intentionally trying to follow me. Kidd said there's a lot of excitement in back as he watched Flag with a TV delay, hearing the crowd reaction before the buckets as the former Duke standout was 8 for 12 from the field and 4 from 6 from the deep in the fourth. Flag's previous career high came against former Duke teammate Con Knuppel, the 4th overall pick and fellow contender for Rookie of the Year. Kidd continues to stump for Flag to win the same award Kidd won for the Mavs 31 years ago and dropped a Michael Jordan reference after Flag's latest milestone. Yes, Jordan was the 1985 Rookie of the Year. He should be Rookie of the Year, Flag said. Unbelievable. The country's not watching the same thing we get to watch on a daily basis. He's in rare air. He used to go, when you talk about MJ and what he did in his rookie year as a teenager, to see what Cooper's doing, just the excitement, just the joy, playing the game, win or lose, just spirit about winning.
right now or not. For at least one night, the rookie overshadowed the long home losing streak, even though he couldn't end it. In soccer, Chelsea's relief of Fernandez is unfair. Enzo Fernandez's agent called Chelsea's decision to drop the midfielder completely unfair on Friday. Fernandez was banished for the next 2 games, the FA Cup quarter-final against Port Vale on Saturday and Premier League match with Manchester next weekend. Chelsea coach Liam Rosenior confirmed Friday. The sanction was a response to Fernandez telling a podcast this week that he would like to live in Madrid. Speculation linking him to a move to Real Madrid, even though he contacted Chelsea. He's contracted to Chelsea through 2031. Fernandez's agent, Javier Pastore, told the Argentina International does not understand the decision. It's completely unfair, Pastore told The Athletic. Banning the player for 2 matches, which moreover are also absolutely crucial for Chelsea because qualification for the Champions League is at stake, and he's one of the team's most important players. There's no real reason or justification for why he has been banned. Enzo didn't understand the situation when the coach told him he accepted it because he's a highly professional guy. Who's always fully committed, whenever he is, and respects decisions. And we don't understand the punishment because he doesn't mention any club or say he wants to leave Chelsea. Far from it. He only mentions Madrid, the city. Our plan after the World Cup is to meet Chelsea again, and if there is no agreement, to explore other options. Rosenior said that was part of the club's decision. It's disappointing for Enzo to speak that way. I've got no bad words to say about him, but a line was crossed in terms of our culture and what we want to build. Enzo, firstly, as a character and a person, as a player, I have the utmost respect. He's frustrated because he wants us to be successful. The door is not closed on Enzo. It's a sanction. You have to protect the culture, and in terms of that, the line was crossed. Fernandez joined Chelsea for a then British record of £107 million, £142 million in 2023. He was also appointed vice captain the following year. One died, 60 injured at rally in Peru. At least one person died and 60 others were injured in what seemed to be a crush of fans at a popular soccer team stadium in Peruvian capital on Friday night, authorities reported. Police said officers rescued people trapped as a result of the influx of Alianza Lima fans in the south stands for Alejandro Valenzuela's stadium the night before their team scheduled game against their biggest rival, Universitario. Earlier, the Ministry of Health had reported the collapse of the wall inside the stadium. Both the police and Alianza Lima denied this in separate statements. Fire Brigadier Marcos Palello said there was at least one fatality and dozens of injured people who were taken to hospitals in the capital. He said he didn't know the cause. Videos broadcast by television stations showed a large crowd of fans in the south stands amidst the explosion of fireworks. Other videos showed apparently injured people sitting in the stands inside the stadium. The Ministry of Health said 60 people had been reported injured so far. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News. The time is 43 minutes after the hour. Let's look at Jay Skursky's Buffalo Bills mailbag now. If needed, Bean should move up or down in the draft. Gary in Lewiston asks, free agency is at a standstill as draft nears. I'm guessing the Bills won't move up or even a few spaces by adding a low won't move up even a few spaces by adding a lower pick. Maybe adding a player, Keon Coleman. With that in mind, who would you prefer, linebacker C.J. Allen or wide receiver Denzel Boston, or trade back to get an edge rusher, either T.J. Parker or Cassius Howell? If they are available, would you trade up, trade back? Jay, based on those scenarios, I'd trade back and take Cassius Howell. I'm not sure there's a receiver worth trading up to where the Bills are picking. Howell would give the Bills something they currently lack, a true speed option off the edge. Sam Ruggiero asks, when Sean McDermott was fired as head coach of the Bills, my first thought was the reaction, either acceptance or resignation, of Josh Allen. Happy Josh Allen is a good start to a successful season for the Bills. After listening to the very positive presser of new coach Joe Brady at the NFL meetings in Arizona, I feel that Josh is not only excited about his new head coach, but as Brady alluded to, he feels completely on board with Brady's hire. Jay, it feels like Brady is settling into the job nicely. He seemed understandably nervous at the first introductory news press conference, but seemingly a lot more relaxed at times, and we've spoken with him since, including at the league's annual meetings in Phoenix. Of course, there's pretty quiet time in the year for the NFL coaches. Brady is eager to get back around his players, which will happen this week at the start of the team's off-season program. As for Allen, Brady said that the quarterback came back to his office and told him he got a job on his own. Even so, it's fair to assume Allen was comfortable with the Bills' decision based on his previous relationship with Brady. There are some clear advantages to Brady taking over the head coach when it comes to knowing what makes the team's quarterback tick. A lot of relationship building has already been done. Brady knows the hard part comes in September when the games start to count. At that point, he's done all the right things. Jay, I've exchanged texts with him recently as last week, as those conversations are not happening on, Larry in Williamsville asks, now that Sean McDermott is gone, do any of the beat writers have any contact with him? What do you think or know he is doing? He is likely going to leave Buffalo for whenever he gets his next hire. My feeling is, why jump into a job? Taking a year off with full pay gives him time to assess the round of openings and see which one best suits him. Jay, I've exchanged texts with him as recently as last week, as those conversations were not on the record. I keep the topics between us, but can say he's spending time with his family, which an NFL coach doesn't get to do so often. It wouldn't surprise me to see him as a hot candidate for openings next season. As you speculated, Larry, of course, of all head coaches I've covered, McDermott was in Buffalo for the longest amount of time so far. That means he formed long-standing relationships throughout the organization and with the media members who cover the team on a daily basis, and with also several people in the community. His kids grew up here and he went to school here, so I'm confident saying that McDermott wanted absolutely nothing more than deliver a Super Bowl championship to Western New York. He's got several years left to coach if he were to so choose, but I firmly expect that when he decides to retire, his career in Buffalo will be looked back fondly, especially if the team wins the Super Bowl in the Josh Allen era. Robert M. asks, Jay, regarding last week's red green zone question, if you truly wish to be a trailblazer, never know when you're being sarcastic. Will you be keeping those stats and reporting them for the Bills? What would be interesting, possibly even meaningful, would be the percentage of points scored inside the green zone compared to the total possible points. With few exceptions for that reason, the end of game kneel downs, points should be always scored by the team entering the zone. Jay, no sarcasm at all, Robert. I think that's an interesting idea. Let's do this. Send me a reminder email before the first game and I'll track our new stat. It might be fun to see where the results tell us. David R. asks, quite a time to be a Buffalo sports fan, both for the Bills and Sabres and playoff worthy, with each team having gone through a lengthy drought. Us old-timers forget just when last year when the Sabres and the Bills were in the postseason. Almost last year the Sabres and Bills were both in the postseason. What would a deep run for the Sabres in the playoff? What would a deep run for the Sabres in the playoffs, we can only hope, mean for the news sports staff? Jay, last question first. I've covered the Bills, Sabres, Bisons, Bandits, colleges, high school sports, local and professional golf at some point during my career at the News. Heck, I've even covered semi-pro basketball at some point. I'm pretty proud of the diverse resume. I have not, however, covered a Sabres playoff game. Mike Harrington and Rachel Lindsay lead our Sabres coverage. My colleague, Bills beat Lance Lysowski, previously covered the Sabres, so it would be natural for him to assist in the coverage as well. I'd be down to help if the coverage in some way too. I would expect the deeper the team goes in the playoffs, the more hands on deck will be placed on deck. Continuing along in sports, Gwelly reflects on 2 years with the Bills, Sabres, and look forward to what's next. When Pete Gwelly was hired as Chief Operating Officer of the Buffalo Bills and Buffalo Sabres a little more than 2 years ago, he felt like he had a pretty good idea of what he was walking into. Gwelly knew the Bills had a winning culture in place, and if the team had fallen short of its ultimate goal of a Super Bowl title, he knew it would be going to be a heavier lift on the Sabres side, figuring out what had led to their prolonged playoff drought. He knew a major part of his responsibility overseeing the business operations would focus on each team's venue, including construction of new Highmark Stadium for the Bills and needed renovations at KeyBank Center for the Sabres. Gwelly, though, did not foresee everything that was ahead. When I came in, I did not expect to be part of a GM transition and a coach transition, he said. That's not on the radar at the time. In a wide-ranging interview with Buffalo News, the NFL's annual meeting in Phoenix last week, Gwelly discussed not only the hires of Sabres general manager Jarmo Kekalainen and Bills head coach Joe Brady, but the array of other issues that pertain to Western New York's two major sports franchises. Gwelly, 61, faced different sets of challenges with each team at the start. On the field, things were going well for the Bills, then led by Sean McDermott and franchise quarterback Josh Allen. The team was a regular postseason participant. Off the field, a new stadium and long-term lease were secured, and the Bills faced a challenge how to sell personal seat licenses, one-time fee paid by fans to secure the right to buy season tickets. They were not popular with fans. They had not been used before in Buffalo, and one of the smallest markets in the NFL. Fans experienced some sticker shock. I'm worried that they would have priced out the Bills' new home. There was some miscommunication in the marketplace around PSL process, Gwelly said. We have developed from a process perspective, I think, which was good, but there was a gap. It was more than communication challenge. Transparency was a problem. Gwelly, who was active in social media, quickly determined that the team needed to be as direct with fans as possible. We started the highest price point in the building. I don't think most people originally understood why. There was nothing to hide here. You need to move through the inventory first so you can kind of understand where you are. Well, I said he knew interest for the current season ticket holders was there. People want to be part of a new stadium. The team was focused on making sure every fan had a seat at the old Highmark Stadium and get an opportunity to do the same at the new one. Ultimately, the strategy worked. Every PSA available, more than 54,000 of them sold out by December. About 75% of the Bills' current season ticket holders will move across the street. Well, he said, numbers considered unprecedented for an NFL team opening a new stadium. Goes back to the process. Which was right. It's just a question of how do you communicate it for people to understand it, Gwelly said. Things were in worse shape for the Sabres. When Gwelly arrived, the team was in year 13 of what became a 14-year playoff drought. In his words, business was not in great shape. The season ticket base was lacking. Fans were angry but not apathetic. That's the key difference. There was so disenfranchised and so angry. You knew the passion was still there, Gwelly said. It might have been tempting to take a sledgehammer to the entire operation. Gwelly went the opposite way, spending the first year trying to uncover everything he could about the Sabres operation. You don't want to make radical changes until you know what you're getting into, he said. The process was really important. Gwelly had 2 different off seasons to work on changes that are showing up on the ice now. The Sabres' remarkable turnaround this season has proven Gwelly right about the Buffalo as a hockey market. The Sabres' push has resulted in a surge of season tickets for next season. More than 11,000 of them had, he said, those numbers typically take years to build, which is a credit to the fan base. When Gwelly worked for the NBA Charlotte Hornets, the Encore product was always not always top level. During those lean years, however, Gwelly had a saying that he used with his staff, be 50 win ready. That meant when on the court product improved to the point of being playoff ready, to be ready to capitalize on that momentum. With the Sabres, he had been amended to being 100-point ready, which the Sabres have done this season. Right man for the job, the Sabres and Bills cycled through several executives in leadership roles before he hired Gwelly, who's a Rochester native and SUNY Rockport grad, spent 10 years with the Hornets and 5 as chief commercial officer of the New York Giants. Pegula, who had gone years without speaking to the media until his decision to fire McDermott in January, responded to email questions from news recently offering more background on his decision to hire Gwelly. Pete's a great fit for us, Pegula wrote. He's combined NBA and NFL experience was important and allows him to work across all the teams. He also works closely with the family office, as well as we can leverage all the resources we have to make the teams as successful and as possible. Gwelly initially set up his schedule to spend Monday and Wednesday with the Bills, Tuesday and Thursday with the Sabres. Friday was a swing day. Saturdays and Sundays were in play too. As he built the leadership teams of both organizations, Gwelly was able more fluidly to move through the teams as well as the National Lacrosse team's Bandits. That's honestly been the fun part of the transition over the years, he said. I have been a little more stringent about where I'm spending my time and making sure we're getting certain things done, but now we've been here a couple of years, we're set up differently. It's definitely more of a blend. It feels making us more fluid in our decision making and putting us in a better position to capitalize on the opportunity.
Let's close out with a look at the scoreboard. In the NHL, Friday's results: Philadelphia 4, New York Islanders 1, St. Louis 6, Anaheim 2. Sunday's games: Minnesota at Detroit at 1 p.m., Florida at Pittsburgh at 3 p.m., Boston at Philadelphia at 3:30, Carolina at Ottawa at 5 p.m., New Jersey at Montreal at 7 p.m., the Washington Capitals take on the New York Rangers at 7 p.m., and St. Louis at Colorado at 9:30 p.m. Monday, Tampa Bay travels to Buffalo to play the Sabres at 6 p.m., Seattle's at Winnipeg at 6:30, Chicago's at San Jose at 9 p.m., Nashville at Los Angeles at 9:30 p.m., and just to mention, the Buffalo Sabres have captured a playoff spot, ending their 14-year playoff drought. With the Detroit Red Wings losing yesterday, both Buffalo and Tampa Bay were guaranteed spots in the NHL playoffs. Now let's look at the NBA scores. Friday results: Charlotte 129, Indiana 108, Philadelphia 115, Minnesota 103, Atlanta 141, Brooklyn 107, New York 136, Chicago 96, Boston 133, Milwaukee 101, Houston 140, Utah 106, Toronto 128, Memphis 96, Orlando 138, Dallas 127, Sacramento 117, New Orleans 113. Sunday's game: Memphis at Milwaukee, Phoenix at Chicago, Toronto at Boston, Washington at Brooklyn, Indiana at Cleveland, Charlotte at Minnesota, Orlando at New Orleans, Utah at Oklahoma, LA Lakers at Dallas, LA Clippers at Sacramento, and Houston at Golden State. In baseball, last night, let's take a quick gander at that. The Athletics beat. Let's look at the NCAA tournament. UConn beat Illinois, and Michigan beat Arizona. They'll play in the championship game on Monday for the title. In women's NCAA tournament, South Carolina beat UConn 62-48. UCLA beat Texas 51-44. Championship Sunday will be today at 3:30. South Carolina at UCLA. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for April 5th. We read from the Buffalo News live on weekday and Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. and rebroadcast it at 4 p.m. For more information, call 716-821-5555. Your reader today has been Ron Bickelman. Thank you for listening.
Coming up next on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have a reading of Buffalo Magazine. Following that at noon is the Sunday Gusto. And at 1 o'clock is the Sunday front section of the New York Times. Stay with us for these readings and more. The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability,